All right. Yeah, it's going to help. Thank you. Appreciate it. So thank you for coming to Eve. It's a great place to do a talk, like-minded folks. So today, my name's Christopher Taylor. I'm going to talk about what I call the power generations. So it's a phrase I've coined. It's based on the planet Pluto, the sign of Scorpio, and what that has to do with power, and how these generations have this in their charts as far as the personal, the universal planets that are moving through that time of their lives. But just a little intro on me. So my background's very non-spiritual, very run-of-the-mill East Coast, grow up, get a job, not ultra-spiritual, kind of, logical, go to school, get a job kind of a mindset. I actually have 2 master's degrees, so that was the beginning of what I did. Got into astrology during the 2nd master's degree and have been into it ever since. So it's been, I don't know, maybe since 2004. So it's been about 13 years of being into astrology and about 9 years of doing charts. So I've kind of been moving on from personal readings, and I want to use it in a more wider fashion to explain what's going on in the world, to let people understand how to use astrology for practical purposes, and not just for getting a reading or seeing what's going to happen in the future and that kind of thing. Anyway. So, Sovereign Harmony, if you're not familiar, if you do know me, this is my website, this is my thing. I've been doing that since 2011. What it means, we'll get to. You'll know what it means by the end of this, so we're not going to bother explaining it now. And that's the idea. And it has a lot to do with this kind of transition of power over time. And I'm a heart math certified trainer, if you don't know what that is. Anyone not know what heart math is? You know heart math? No? Yes? So it's basically a scientific research system where we're using what's called coherence. It's really just a measure of the balance between the mind and the heart. Okay? So the Heart Math Institute, they've done research on what governs decision making, what governs cooperation, and it turns out that the heart is much more influential than the mind. And so part of creating peace within and with others starts with that, and that's what we'll get into here. So I want to start astrologically with something that most people into astrology, but not too deep, don't know about or don't understand. Everybody knows of the age of Aquarius, right? Moving to the age of Aquarius. It's so outdone, in my opinion. It's overdone. The age of ultra spiritual. Well, people ask me all the time, so when did the age of Aquarius begin? And I'm always like, it's been happening since, in my opinion, the middle 18th century. Like around the time of the American Revolution, it was the beginning of the age of Aquarius. We're still in that transition zone. And we'll still be in it for another several years. But to me, that's the less important aspect of the change, the shift. To me, the most important one is Regulus. Who here has heard of Regulus in some form, even if you don't know what it means, the signifier of it? So Regulus astrologically, so first of all, it's a fixed star. So it moves as the heavens move. So it's not moving as fast as other planets and stars. It takes about 2,000 plus years, 2,200 years, something like that, to move through a sign. And for the last, since 156 BC, right up until 2011, Regulus was in Leo. And Regulus rules power structures. So how power is governed, okay? And so Leo, does anyone know anything about Leo energy? It's like masculine energy, first of all. There's a competitiveness to it. There's a showiness to Leo, right? It's also, if you apply all these qualities to power, so like governance and things like that, what do you get? You get megalomaniacs. You get the Roman Empire, essentially, which started at the beginning of this and hasn't really died. And everything that came with Christianity after that, and the merger of Christianity and the Roman Empire, has all been about dominance, all been about might is right, competition, things of that nature. Now, what's even more interesting, and so this is that transition, it's a precession from Leo to Virgo. So this is, again, we're 6 years into this. This happened 6 years ago, but it's a 2,000 plus year period, so it takes a while to ease into it. I look at it like cell phones. if you have a cell phone, let's say you can no longer charge it, you only have the charge that's left, but you do have some charge left, right? And so there's a lot of Regulus and Leo energy still around in charge, but if you charge yourself in any way, you're going to get Virgo energy now. It's a different kind of energy. We'll get into what that is. But we see people like, and I'll get to at the very end of this, I'm going to show his chart. Trump, you can't do something like this without mentioning him. He was actually born with Regulus rising in his chart. So this idea of transitioning from Leo to Virgo, he's kind of the prototypical image of what we're releasing, if you want to think of it that way. But it has to come up to be released, right? That's why he's here. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, not only is Regulus and Leo have significance of this masculine dominance and things like that, but the 29th degree of any sign, when a planet moves to the 29th degree of any sign, if you're born with planets at the 29th degree of a sign, there's more significance. There's extra oomph. There's extra effect. And so Regulus was at the 29th degree of Leo from about the mid to late 1930s, right up until the end, obviously, because then it exited Leo. So the last 70 years or so was the most intense expression of Regulus and Leo. And what happened right about there, right around the time that started, is when the Nazis invaded Poland. And then we had an atom bomb created, which is like the epitome of Regulus and Leo, right? Destruction, annihilation. And then we had the buildup of the entertainment industry and sports, so that we rose people to godlike status. So celebrities, this is very Regulus and Leo, right? And so this whole idea of having power, like someone having power over a whole rest of the group, and the group giving their power away by worshiping celebrities, worshiping politicians, worshiping musicians, right? And so people think of it as, oh, things have gotten worse and worse over time, and it's just going to get worse. And in the reality is we've gone over a cliff, we've switched energies, and the only thing left of that is what's lingering, and it can no longer be recharged. So it's just a matter of time before it runs out. And people like Trump, for example, are sucking it out of people to survive, right? And there's more people like him. And so this transition from Regulus and Leo to Regulus and Virgo, which will be more pronounced as we move, and it's what these generations that I'll talk about are helping us shift from the Leo energy to the Virgo energy, which is very different. So Virgo energy is it's very feminine. It's very earth-based. It's also very fair, It's also an energy that has to do with health and wellness and things of that nature. So Regulus and Leo, when it comes to, if we just looked at medicine, for example, Regulus and Leo is the pharmaceutical industry, right? Create a bunch of stuff to throw down people's throats, and that'll hammer away the disease. That's that masculine approach. Virgo energy with health is going to be more about allowing healing and different methods of healing. And we can already feel that this is happening. But it's this last pulse, this last effort to survive, that the Leo energy is pulsing forward, that we're seeing it now, because it's literally grasping for air, grasping for something to hold on to. But what we had was imbalanced gender equality. Now we're moving into where gender equality makes sense, right? Because if you have imbalanced gender in any form, masculine and feminine, you don't have functionality. And so Virgo is about functionality. So we're going to have power according to functionality, which would need a balance in that. Central hierarchy of authority and collectivism was part of Regulus and Leo. So we have like an either or. We can either do fascism or communism. There's no in between, right? And it's like no matter whenever you get collective, that's what you get. We move to Regulus and Virgo in combination with the age of Aquarius. We get power that is decentralized. Pieces. Virgo has to do with pieces, if you're familiar. So Pisces, the opposite of Virgo, is the whole picture. Virgo is the pieces. So we're talking about power in the pieces. So decentralized authority, decentralized sources of power. So that, just talking about power, centralization of power, actual electricity. You see what's going on in Puerto Rico right now. The whole reason why the whole island is shut down is because they have centralized power. You don't want to have it coming from one central unit when something happens. You want to have decentralized smaller units. That way there may be some damaged ones, but the ones that aren't can feed the rest. That's the way Virgo energy makes more sense. So looking at more microgrids and free energy. Anybody familiar with free energy? A little bit. We'll touch on it a little bit. But anyway, so in terms of health, again, allopathic medicine separated into parts. So Regulus and Leo is splitting the body into parts. You have, lung cancer versus prostate cancer versus when you can treat cancer as cancer. You know, it's one thing, and that's what the Virgo energy has to do is understanding that. So it's more comprehensive medicine, holistic. Regulus in Leo, like I said, I talked about the entertainment and politicians and sports. Elevation, the amount of money someone that plays sports or someone who's entertainment makes compared to the rest of people, that's a very imbalanced thing. That's Regulus in Leo in action. And that's what's starting to fall apart. It's, you know, you can already see it, like I think in the NFL, the viewership this year is dropping. So we're already seeing this drop in what has always, I guess, moved society and whatnot. But sovereign empowerment is how we're moving. Then we're going from the earth as a source of resource extraction. So what does the earth have for us to extract, to how do we manage what we have? So that's Virgo, is managed. Virgo's a very management energy. So we're managing things, we're not just taking them, using them, and wasting them. And then the last thing there is Regulus in Leo is very much about the value of an individual in terms of what they can do for the state. You know, how can you help your country? How can you help your this? And Regulus in Virgo is more the value of the individual creativity and what your input is. So that's the general switch. And so this means a shift in everything we know, essentially. So how government is run. We're going to talk about that now that we have a little more technology, how, you know, some things are obsolete. Education, media, medicine, power distribution, agriculture, everything. Everything up there is going through a shift because of this. And so what does this mean? We're going from more of that ego-based pyramid structure to more of the natural structure, which is that round image. No more gurus. Gurus are something that, again, is part of the Leo energy. So even in the spiritual community, you know, the idea of gurus is dying. And the people that need to have followers are starting to suffer. And that's what's going on. So has anyone noticed that? Yeah. So there's people that, you know, were once, whenever you see those guru eyes, I'm always shaking my head. You see people looking up at someone like, wow, that person is so much better than I am, so much more powerful. They know so much more. They can help me so much. But that's dying because that's Regulus in Leo. It's also goodbye to things like to me, things like multi-level marketing came out of that last pulse of Regulus at the 29th degree of Leo. Because it can only exist it's a codependent system. It can only exist or function. You can only really make money if you depend on people under you to keep on recruiting, right? And so it's a very Regulus in Leo system. And then I think even the traditional idea of coaching, which was born, people might disagree with this, but it was born in that Regulus in Leo. And this idea that like you're going to babysit someone through their life doesn't make sense anymore. Because we're all adults, we're sovereign beings, and no one can babysit you. And like, when I've seen, witnessed certain, everyone's different, but there's certain coaching that I've witnessed that it's just a parent-child relationship, and that's not helping someone grow into sovereignty. And so we're transitioning from separation consciousness, this consciousness that we're separate, and so we have to make these actions to connect, which is what codependence is, right? You're so dependent on what's outside of you to stay connected, to connection consciousness, knowing that you're totally connected to the all and you're sovereignly provided for, and so then you can make choices about how you connect. You don't have to make needs to connect. You understand? So that's the big difference there. So a couple other cycles happening in the background, in addition to that Regulus switching. So that Regulus into Virgo is a large-scale background that just is there. And so how do we navigate through that with the other cycles that are happening? So in 2012, we all were waiting for the shift, right? Waiting for the big shift that was going to happen. And in reality, it did. There was energetic shifts that happened, but it wasn't like this night and day thing. One of the things that happened was the Pluto-Uranus cycle. So Pluto has to do with death, rebirth, transformation. Uranus is like society, rapid changes, things like that. And they were together, they were united in the mid to late 1960s in the sign of Virgo. So there's the sign again, Virgo. So same place that Regulus is now. And so this was planting new seeds for societal transformation relative to the Virgo theme. And of course, in the mid-late 1960s, what were the themes? Respect for the earth and Mother Nature, and this is what Virgo is, okay? So what happened in 2012, 2012 to 2015, was they were squaring each other from June 2012 to April 2015. So that's the next phase in the cycle. The conjunction in Virgo is the initiation. Then they square each other. And then they'll oppose each other in the mid to late 2040s. That'll be the culmination. But where we went through a transition, 2012 to 2015. And that transition was a shakeup of everything that was, of all of our realities in a lot of ways. A pretty tumultuous period these last several years. Another big one that maybe some astrologers overlook, people don't recognize, but is anyone familiar with what a Venus occultation is? Occultation is just a fancy word for eclipse. Okay, so Venus, it's far away, so relative to the sun, it's very small, it's a little speck. When it moves over the sun, you don't notice, you can't see it. It's not going to make a shadow, it's too small. But it happens. It happens every 121 years. It'll happen at one point, and then 8 years later it'll happen again, and then it won't happen for another 120 years. And then it happened, and 8 years later. So there's 8-year windows, essentially, that this signifies. And it only happens in Gemini, okay? Gemini has to do with connectivity, connection consciousness. So every time Venus moves through there, we get another level of connection. And I'll prove it to you, because the last two of these that happened. One was December 1874 to December 1882. In terms of connection, technology and stuff, where were we in 1873 that was far different than 1883, say 10 years later, in terms of what the potential for connection was? Does anyone know what was invented? Telegraph was one, but the telephone was also invented. But yeah, telegraph, telephone, similar type of technology. And so what that did, it took us from in 1873, where if you wanted to talk to someone, you had to either write a letter that took 3 months to get there and 3 months back, get on a horse, or whatever, right? Now, theoretically, even though it wasn't technically possible because the wires weren't laid out, theoretically, by 1883, you could talk to anyone, anywhere, at any time, from anywhere. Whoa. That's a huge leap in connection, right? A huge leap in connection. And what happened here between June 2004 and June 2012 relative to connection? The internet was already invented, but what really, well, Facebook, like more general, social media. 2004 is when Facebook started, right? So now we take the ability to contact anyone at any time from anywhere, and we make it not technically possible yet, but it's theoretically possible to reach everyone at one time from anywhere, right? Because I could live stream this and talk, and if everyone was watching, we had the bandwidth to do it, everyone could see it. And so you don't have to be in a position of power, Regulus and Leo kind of power, to be allowed to have your message heard. Everyone can hear your message. So that's where we're at now. That's what in 2013, that didn't exist in 2003. This ability, again, not technologically feasible yet, but it wasn't technologically feasible for the phone thing in 1883, but look at it now. And this will happen a lot faster than that happened. So at some point, it will be possible for anyone to just pick up a computer and talk to everyone, potentially, if everyone were to tune in. That's 7 billion viewers, right, at once. That would be pretty incredible. So this is where we're at now. And you have to understand that when the United States was formed, for example, that was before this. So they created a whole system of what's supposed to be liberty and freedom and all that good stuff, but without the ability for individuals to actually connect, because it didn't exist. And so we'll talk about this a little bit later, how the U.S. is about to go through a major transformation, and the only thing that's going to save it is by adjusting to modern technology. I didn't want to ruin that, but here we go. This is so sensitive. Anyway, so other things going on. So as part of that, I said Pluto and Uranus, they joined each other in Virgo in the 1960s. They squared each other a few years ago. But Pluto, in general, where it is in the zodiac, is in the sign of Capricorn. Okay? It spends about 16 to 20 years in each sign, depending on how fast it's moving. And different parts of the zodiac, it moves faster than others. But 2008 to 2024, we're in this window of Pluto and Capricorn. The last two windows when this happened are pretty interesting, because Pluto has to do, again, with transformation, death, rebirth. Capricorn is like governmental structures, organization, how the world is governed, etc. In the early 1500s, at that time, this is the last time, or 2 times ago that Pluto was in Capricorn. At the beginning of that time, we'd just been coming off of 1,500 years of Christianity dominating with no change, no one challenging it, nothing happening. Then, all of a sudden, in the early 1500s, when Pluto was in Capricorn, Martin Luther pinned a note on the door of the church, and this was the Protestant Reformation. So suddenly, this powerful Catholic church started to break down to pieces, right? What happened the next time around, 1762 to 1778? Anything big happened there as far as new forms of governance and things like that popped up?
1776.
Exactly. So what we shifted there was the world essentially in 1762 was ruled by monarchies. No matter what piece of land you had, it was under some king and queen's rule, right? That was the beginning of the end of monarchies. Since then, there's been no new monarchies, just some have held on, but everything else has fallen away. So there's been a move toward liberty, but we moved toward liberty without the connection technologies that we now have. So we weren't ready for it. We are now. Neptune is also in Pisces right now. It's been since 2011. It will be till 2025. This is stirring deep longings for this utopian idea of the past and the future. You saw this. This is basically Trump versus Sanders in the election in 2016. Both were the heroes to their side, right? One was the hero to the utopian past. One's the hero to the utopian future. It's just Neptune and Pisces in action. Neither one are the answer because we're going to sovereignty. We're getting out of the Regulus and Leo rule. And we'll talk about that later too. Uranus and Taurus as well. Change and upheaval, that's Uranus. Taurus is finances, resources, physical resources. Enters in the spring, so a few months away, it'll enter Taurus. It'll be there for about 8 years. And so this is where we're going to see major upheavals in the financial system, in my opinion. It's time. And this is why I put this here. Is this coming? What's happening? I don't know if that's the answer. That's why I have a question mark there. But major transformations in the global financial structure are happening. There's other things going on too, outside of that. There's other countries aligning from other global systems like BRICS. Anyone heard of BRICS? No? Okay. There's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're teaming up to get off of the World Monetary Fund and all the other things that rule the world. But maybe cryptocurrency, maybe that, I don't know. Whatever it is, big changes are coming. So this is called the power generation, so I wanted to define power. I'm a geek, I know. But, so what is power? It's basically work over time. What is work? It's force over distance. So moving something, so moving mass over a distance, over a period of time, that yields power, right? And so I just had fun with the math. If you plug in, so if work equals, over here, work equals force times distance, and if force is ma, so that's our F, force equals F, we just replace that with that. Work actually equals mad, right? Or equals MAD. It's mass times acceleration times distance. Mad. And so power is mad over time, by definition. So when you get mad over time, you build power. It's power to change things, right? And really, to me, the definition of what is power, it's the capacity to influence. So if you even think about any kind of power that you use for anything, it's the capacity to make it work, to make it happen, to move it, to change it. It's a capacity to influence. That's really what it is. And so, I was going to talk about that. So how do we derive power? We derive it from a flow of anything. So the example here is a dam. You got water, which is mass, flowing over a distance over time, right? You can tap that and get power. So the same thing is true about anything. Like how many people have heard the term money is power or information is power? They're inaccurate because you have to reword it. Like now think of it this way. If you think about it in these terms, money, let's just say access to the flow of money yields power. That's accurate according to the definition of what power is. Access to the flow of information yields power. You understand the difference? So it's just understanding the little nuance there, and going back to that idea. And so just look at the human body, or where this thing is so sensitive. So we can derive power from the flow too. How? Because we have our own connection to source, and we can flow that through our bodies at any time. This is what meditation is the process of doing. This is what going out into nature is doing. You're recharging, you're moving energy through you. And that's what the chakras are, right? They're spinning turbines, tapping power, or tapping the flow to yield power, right? So it's not anything outside of what we already know. And so the idea is anytime we have a higher energy feeding a lower energy, which is it's what creates the flow in the first place. So if you think of yourself, the higher self in the lower self, the higher self is always going to be bigger and more powerful than the lower self, right? So you always have a flow going from higher to lower. So you're never running out. And this is the definition of what sovereignty is. You never run out. You have sovereign flow. It'll never go away. And we have the choice to dam it. We have the choice to tap into it. We have the choice to have it, someone else use it from us, right? All this power is flowing through us. All it takes is someone to pull it from us, take our power away. But that's what Regulus and Leo did, and some people are still addicted to that. So anyway, I'm going to move into the actual power generations, where they are, what the years are, how it lines up, how this is moving us through this period of transition. So if you're not familiar with the planets, just dividing them up into what there are, the lights, the sun, the moon, personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. We're not going to talk about those. We're also not going to talk about Jupiter and Saturn. We're going to talk about the evolutionary planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So these are the planets that move really slow. And so if you're born within several years of someone, you're going to have similar planets in the same signs as far as those planets go. And so the three main planets I'm looking at, this Uranus is the first one. This has to do with individuality, society, sudden inspiration, lightning insights, unique creativity, openness to the new and unknown. Rebellion is a big part of Uranus. So where Uranus is in your chart is going to tell us where your rebellious side is, where your generation's rebellious side is. And it's also characteristic of astrology itself. It rules Aquarius. So the age of Aquarius, which, going back to that idea, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the different periods. And it's really just about following Uranus, the planet Uranus, through the zodiac relative to Pluto and Neptune. And so we're really following this shift into the age of Aquarius. Uranus rules Aquarius. Neptune has to do with intuition, mystical experiences, subtle perception, but also illusions, false appearances, escapism, drugs, and pseudo-realities of all kinds. Pisces, I'm a Pisces, so I know all about that. Pluto, power, transformation, how we deal with power, regenerative powers, dying and being reborn. This is the Plutonian energy that we all have somewhere in our stuff. And so again, the power generations, the primary link is this Scorpio energy, or the Pluto-Scorpio energy. And so the primary nodes of these, and really everything in between here falls into it as well. But anyone from the mid 60s to the mid to late 90s falls into the range. But there are three nodes where it really pulsed, where these planets were lined up in a certain way that signified that transition. So the mid to late 1960s, the late 70s, early 80s, and then the early to mid 90s. Okay, and we can kind of give them all a nickname when we get through that. So again, power is a capacity to influence, and that's what this period of time, the souls during this period of time have, is the capacity to influence. So before we jump into those three, I just want to do the one set of energy before the first power generation. And these are the ones born in the mid to late 40s through the early 50s, often known as the baby boomers, but I like to call them the Awakeners. And so you'll see every chart we're going to look at has Pluto and Neptune 2 signs apart. In this case, Pluto and Leo, Neptune and Libra. We're going to watch those tilt up the chart as we get in further in time, but they're always 2 signs apart. It's this planet Uranus that does all the moving. Here, it's 2 signs from there and 4 signs from there. The next generation will see it'll join Pluto, then it'll be in between, then it'll join Neptune, and then it'll be on the other side. But everything's tilting at the same time. You'll notice that pattern. But it is following that. And so anyway, the current age of these folks is going to be in the 60s to around 70-ish. So these are the people, Uranus and Gemini. Okay, so think of Gemini energy. It's information, it's ideas, opinions, right? This is the generation that was told what was true and said, well, what about my idea? Well, I don't really believe that. What about this? They were open to new ideas, new ways of thinking. They were okay with tradition, but it was like, well, what if this? What if that? What about this idea? And so this became the hippies, experimenting with new ideas and things like that. Pluto and Leo. So this is, we're talking about Regulus and Leo. So with Pluto and Leo was also a very intense time. There was a dramatic shift towards self-importance with this generation. Okay, so we went from really before World War II, there was no sense of individuality. Like you're just part of a family, part of a community, you weren't really an individual. This is where the individual was born, right? This is where like Elvis Presley was becoming famous, and Marilyn Monroe and the entertainers and everything started to blow up. Because remember, Pluto was in Leo and Regulus was in Leo. So we had a blow up of that. And so this generation here They're the ones that were expressing that mostly. And then Neptune and Libra. So this is, again, the energy of dissolution. So when it comes to societal roles, this is the first generation to be like, well, I'm a woman, but, you know, or I'm a man, but do I have to do that? Right? So they started questioning that. So that set the stage. This is the energy, the people that set the stage for the power generations to come in. Okay? So I want to give props to this energy. So the next one here, so the first power generation, in other words, mid to late 1960s. This is when, I already mentioned it, Pluto and Uranus were conjunct in Virgo. That's them right there. So again, Uranus moved up, caught up with Pluto. Pluto and Neptune both moved up, but still stayed 2 signs apart. But they caught up. So now we have this significant time period. This is what's also referred to as Generation X. These are the people that were teenagers in the 80s, right? Now they're in late 40s, 50-ish, right? This is a group that was unsatisfied with the status quo, but couldn't quite put their finger on what they wanted to do. They just wanted to not do what they're supposed to do, right? That's how I would classify it. And the reason is because they're essentially waiting for these other generations that are coming up that can actually be utilized. So what's happening here is, like, with all this Virgo energy, there's a lot of management energy here. There's a lot of ability to manage people, to manage large systems, to manage communities, to manage whatever. And so that's really what they are. They're vessels and the organizers, right? This is the initiation of societal transformation. So these people are born with the impulse to change everything. Nope. And so what are the vessels, again, what's the talent in this group? Uranus and Virgo, this is individualization, Uranus, of purpose and work, Virgo. This is a lot of entrepreneurs are born here. A lot of entrepreneurial leanings in this group, because they all have this internal management aspect to them. It's hard to follow the rules or follow the orders when you want to give your own orders for yourself, right? And so that's the function of that. But again, there is a sense of more purpose coming for this generation as these other generations are growing up and getting more useful, not children anymore. Also, Pluto and Virgo is this transformation of resources and priorities. You can see that just on a societal level. And then Neptune and Scorpio, dissolution of power and fear. And what did, just as this group, because remember, Scorpio has to do with sexuality and whatnot. What did this group experience as they were teenagers in the 80s, just coming into puberty, just coming in? What happened to sexuality all of a sudden? What came up in the 80s? No. AIDS. Oh. AIDS came. This idea that a lid had to be shut on sexual expression, right? So this is what this group had to dissolve this idea. I mean, when they were little kids in the 70s, this was like when the porn industry was booming, and who knows how many of these 8-year-old kids were watching their dad's tapes and whatnot, and But the idea being is all of a sudden this idea of playful sexuality became no, can't do that anymore, can't play anymore. See? So this is what this generation had to deal with. The next generation, who are now in their 30s, I'm actually born right in the middle of this. The communicators and translators. These are the ones that can go between the older generations and the younger generations, can understand the old way, but can communicate the new way. And we have a way of being very versatile. Okay? This is sometimes called Generation Y, which is just very nebulous. There's no real definition to it. The way I look at it, though, is we are the generation that was raised for a world that no longer existed when we got there. That's the way I look at it. Because I was a kid in the 80s, I was an adolescent in the 90s, and then when around 2000, 9/11, kind of that period is my transition from childhood to adulthood. And the world was different in adulthood than it was in childhood. My first email address was in the fall of 97 when I went to college. When I graduated college in 2001, I couldn't imagine not checking my email, right? This huge change shifted. And then you take into account the whole pre-9/11, post-9/11 reality of life. So it's like everything I learned up through college was obsolete once I left college. And that's what this generation has to deal with, this idea of versatility, change, constant change. And so Scorpio in this case, so the other generation was Neptune and Scorpio. This one here, we have Uranus and Scorpio. That's my generation. Quick changes, quick annihilations. So my generation deals with a lot of job losses. It's one of those things that we deal with. I've had a lot of jobs lost. But it's the idea that we're transforming power in a certain way. We have Pluto in Libra. Okay, Libra is a sign of relationships and social order and whatnot, and Pluto in Libra is a great transformation in that. Okay, so that's a big part of what we're doing. This generation is changing what a relationship looks like. So what I mean by that is the idea of marriage and what it looks like, what it's supposed to be, what it's not supposed to be. I can tell you that probably half the people I grew up with went traditional route, and the other half went it was this amazing cut in half split deck thing that happened. And like me, I'm not the traditional route, And it's I look at it I'd love to partner up, but I'll never settle down, And that's this idea of transitioning marriage, is the idea that you don't have to settle down ever, just partner up. If it doesn't improve your life, why would you have a partner in the first place, right? That's what's coming through here. And then Neptune and Sagittarius, dissolution of the boundaries and limits. So we're a generation that's not afraid to try new things. We're not opposed to try it out. Let's see if that works. Let's annihilate the thing that we have and go with it. Again, so we're very adaptable. Then we get to the Millennials, what they're so called. Now we got Uranus is caught up to Neptune. Pluto and Neptune are still 2 signs away, but Uranus is now over there. This is in the early to mid 90s. It was high. So they're the indigos. I call them the passion or the fuel. This is the fuel that first power generation was waiting for. Those ones that were teenagers in the 80s that were angsty but didn't quite know what to do with it. This is what they need to do. And it's interesting because a lot of those folks, if they had kids in their, say, mid to late 20s, have children this age. And so there's a lot of battles between parents and child in that zone, and they don't understand that they're on the same team. This is where I come in, or people in the late 70s, early 80s, because again, we translate, help them bridge that gap. Because I get along very well with that early to mid 90s generation, very well. I don't know why, but for when they look up to me, it's constantly interacting. I'm finding interactions with them all the time. It's I skipped over everyone. It's that if you're born between 92 and 95, it's for whatever reason, I tend to really life finds ways for me to be interacting with them for some reason. But this is a very potent energy, to say the least. So they have 2 planets in Capricorn. Capricorn again is its governance and whatnot. We have Pluto in Capricorn right now, and so we are in a period, just like we said before, of a major transformation of how things are governed in the world. The last time was the American Revolution. The time before that was the Protestant Reformation. What's happening now? Well, it's these people that are going to help us move it through. I see this group, I'm going to put it right there, as some of the youngest leaders we're ever going to see. They're only in their early to mid 20s right now. This group, when they're in their early to mid 30s, are going to be leading everything 10 years from now. And that's because all that Capricorn energy. So it's this idea that you don't have to wait till you're 60 to be in charge. There's going to be a flux of young people that have the charisma, the power to really lead the charge and change. And it's that group that's going to really change how things are governed and structured. Because we have this new technology. This is the first generation that was born and lived with technology. They grew up with technology. The internet was around when you were a little kid. That's bizarre to me. But for this group, the internet was around when they were little kids. And so all they remember is there might have been dial-up or something versus what it is now. That's the only difference they know. So this is, when it comes to taking leadership positions, you're not going to be able to tolerate the old systems that are in place that are obsolete because of new technology. So the technological changeover is going to be rapid with this. And there's also Pluto and Scorpio, that transformation of power, death, and sexuality. This is the first generation that, again, major difference from what I grew up with, because I've had a lot of interactions with them, and it's I can't believe what I hear from what their experiences were in high school and this and that, because this is the first generation where basically because of the internet, porn was at your fingertips, right? And when you were my age, it was like two separate things. It was real life interactions with human beings and like relationships, and then there was this like thing over here that, you know, if a friend of yours had a dad that had a VHS or a magazine, then maybe you got exposed to it. But you couldn't just get on the computer and see it. This is the first generation that was applying what they saw in their lives, like thinking that that was what sexuality was. And it's anyone that was born, say, mid to late 90s, they were in high school, probably like 2005 to 2012 range. That was the experience. Was a lot of, like, especially females being pressured with this idea of what they're supposed to be doing, and they're getting, you know, and the males are getting these ideas from what they're seeing on the internet, right? And so this is what this Pluto and Scorpio is. It's a real, like, transformation. There's a lot of healing that's happening too in a collective because of that. Then we get to this generation I want to talk about, which is what I call the lovers, the peace bearers. The main pulse of that in the early to mid 20s coming up here in the next, like, within the next 5 to 10 years. But they've been popping as early as, like, say 2008, 2011. There might be some like 8, 9-year-olds that are part of this. It's hard to say. It's a kind of spread far between. But again, now you can see Uranus is past Neptune, is now 2 signs away. So it's just that following Uranus relative to Neptune and Pluto. But this is a generation that is that needs things to be changed so they can actually exist. All right. So Uranus and Taurus in Gemini is kind of switching in there. This is individualization of worth and information exchange. The idea that everyone's important is something that this generation is going to be bringing forth. The idea, again, is the anti-collectivism, anti-state kind of energy, the individual. Pluto and Capricorn Aquarius is a transformation of laws. Again, because of that generation just ahead of them in the early to mid-90s, it's going to be jumping into leadership positions and changing how governance is done. They're going to be part of that transformation. And then dissolution, Pisces and Aries, Neptune and Pisces and Aries, dissolution of the unknown, and also maybe dissolution of war. Who knows? This could be the generation that brings the end of war, Neptune in Aries, because it just kind of starts to fall by the wayside. When we start breaking down into smaller units, and we're communicating, we have the technology to communicate, and we have the resources, there's no reason to fight anymore, right? If we have that kind of exchange. So what's coming up for what these generations are having to, be a part of shifting from the early to mid-20s, we have big shifts coming up real soon. In 2020, that's a big year, and this is the next election year in the U.S. Big surprise. But it's a big year energetically all over the world. January 2020, Saturn joins Pluto in Capricorn. I should say, Saturn's going to enter Capricorn December 19th, so we're about 3 months away. Saturn enters Capricorn. It won't exit until it crosses Pluto in Capricorn, and it'll hit Pluto in Capricorn in 2020. March, Mars joins Pluto. And then from March to November, Jupiter is with Pluto. So this whole, that whole Pluto in Capricorn, which signifies, again, this big transition, is getting highlighted. So there's something big happening in 2020 on a world stage. Also, Jupiter's going to join Saturn at the end of 2020 at 0 degrees Aquarius. Here's your age of Aquarius. Pluto is going to actually enter Aquarius just after that, a few years later, in 2023, 2024. In my opinion, people say, when's the start of the age of Aquarius? Again, it started already, but these movements between 2020 and 2024 is really when we start to leap into age of Aquarius. Okay. What also happens before that, because remember, you mentioned in 1776, that was at the very tail end of when Pluto was in Capricorn last time, right? So Pluto was at 28 degrees, there's 30 degrees in each sign, 28, almost at the end, when the Declaration of Independence was signed. Okay? So it's going to be back there. It's going to return in 2022, 2023. So we have the Pluto return for the U.S., which is something you don't get as a human because it's 248 years to go around the zodiac. Has anyone heard of a Saturn return for a human? Okay. It's the same thing, but for a nation. So a Saturn return is every 29 years. So when you turn about 29, when you're in mid-50s, you get these Saturn returns. There's shifts, big shifts in the direction of the focus of your life. And for a nation, most of them don't last that long, but they can get a Pluto return, which is 248 years roughly. And the U.S.'s Pluto return is coming up in about 4.5, 5 years from now. And that's going to be huge. It's coming just at the time when, and what's interesting about that is those years, roughly speaking, is when the millennial power generation is going to be having their Saturn return. So they're going to be coming into adulthood. That's what I look at it as, coming into adulthood as the United States is coming up to a point of destruction or total transformation, one or the other, pick one, right? Destruction of the old for sure, but will there be a total transformation to something new? And it's that millennial generation coming into their own that are going to be part of this technological push to change things really fast. And again, they're still going to be young. They're going to be 30-ish, but still old enough, okay? Does everyone understand that, what I'm saying there? Like the implications of that? So as the US is going through a make or break, the power generations are all in adulthood, finally. And the rest of it we won't need to talk about, but that's the major part of what's going on in the next couple of years. So then when we get to the mid to late 2040s, like I said before, the Pluto-Uranus started in the mid to late 60s. It's squared in 2012 to 2015, and it's going to oppose each other in the mid to late 2040s. That's the culmination. And Uranus will be, guess where? In Virgo. Right? So you got Regulus in Virgo. You got the initiation of this Pluto-Uranus in Virgo, and it's going to finalize with Uranus in Virgo again, and Pluto in Pisces on the other side of that. And how old will we all be at that point? The Awakeners, if they're still around, will be approaching 100, right? To see what they started. The organizers, the ones that, the Generation X are going to be 80-ish, plus or minus. So roughly the average age of a human at this point in this country, right? Average lifespan, I should say. And then the communicators, conduits, translators, like my age, are going to be mid to late 60s. Those indigos, millennials, will be in their mid-50s. Certainly entrenched in powerful positions by then, right? And then those peace bearers, those lovers, the ones that can't handle the old energy, they'll be just entering societal adulthood, not energetic adulthood, because to me that's going to be about 30 when Saturn returns. But societal adulthood, early 20s. So they'll be entering the workforce, entering life on their own, in a new world, right? Governed by a different way. Where are we? All right. So then, so how do we? So this is all great fluff, all theoretical. So on the ground, how do we actually do this? How do we actually create these conscious and peaceful communities that are sustainable, that aren't influencing others, that there are no externalities that have to be addressed, like pollution and things like that? How do you create those? And to me, it starts from the inside. To me, like freedom and peace starts from the inside out. You can't put freedom on people. This whole idea, like what's going on right now with the protests in the NFL, and like I just say, to me, it's like if you have an issue with someone protesting, you're not free. If you have an issue with Trump commenting on protesters, you're not free. Like just be free, practice freedom. Do you know what I mean? Be free. Be who you are. And I just put this little graph together. Basically, what it says is as predictability, I should say, as consciousness increases, predictability does what? It decreases, right? So I always find it interesting because when I do charts for people, I find that most people looking for a reading are more conscious, which means they're less predictable, and yet they're looking for a prediction. So the only people, exactly, but that's the idea, is like, I need to be reaching these people, they'll be very predictable, and But you don't meet those people because they're not looking for you, and that all goes back to what Carl Jung said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. There is no real fate. There's just unconscious contribution to what you're creating. That's all there is, right? And that's what we're getting at. But the point is, we have to get inside first. Does anyone know how the sun works? Because this goes back to the idea of sovereignty versus codependence. It doesn't give off its energy. It actually implodes. And then it gets hotter because of that implosion. So in other words, by focusing on itself, it gives off, and it doesn't die, it actually strengthens. This is why like Leo is ruled by the sun, because it's the same process, right? The Leo has to express, and the more they express, the more other people are benefiting from it. And that's the idea. But this is the idea, is being the example, not giving your energy away, but focusing on who you are, amplifying that, and allowing that to help others. there's no, there's outside of our minds, there is no permanent definition of who we are. We're a changing, ever fluxing unit of energy, Normal doesn't exist. And our path is our own, our body is our own temple. And this is what we're going back to those power generations, this idea of we're getting rid of the need for collective definition and being a part of something outside of who we are. I like a play on words, path, illogical. If you're on a path that has nothing to do with alignment with your soul, it's an illogical path, or pathological, right? You're on a pathological journey. Everyone's journey is different, you cannot judge. And that's what we're coming into. So freedom, the way I look at it, freedom is our birthright. We have the power to choose peace in any situation. Going back to any controversy going on, like I said, anything to do with Trump, I did a talk in November about the election specifically and how he was going to really trigger everyone and how it was an awesome opportunity to stand in your sovereignty and choose peace. And it's kind of happening a little bit, right? You got so many people reacting to Trump as if he's this powerful God. He's a guy with opinions that has no real power to do anything about his opinions because we have a system in place that he can't really do much about. So just be at peace with yourself. It's an example. Our ability to cooperate with others, and bring peace to the situation starts with ourself and our own well-being. So stop worrying about what other people are doing, and our internal disagreements, when we come to peace with that, that is what helps us accept other people's disagreements with us. And that's really what I focus on with my work, or what I want to focus on anyway. To be free, we must disagree. We're not free. If you're just agreeing to agree, you're not free. You're codependent. You're like, oh, they don't agree with me. I better agree with them so we can all get along. And no, disagree away. You have to. That's freedom. Disagree. There's no other expression, no better expression of freedom than disagreeing. That's why, like, when you see like a little kid basically trying to express their freedom, they're like, no. They're not agreeing. I mean, it's an exercise. They're practicing in some ways appropriate, but the idea of being is that's what they're doing. They're exercising that right. This thing, all right. So to me, it starts from within. So creating cooperative, sustainable communities requires intentional peace and understanding of disagreements, right? You're not going to form communities of all these people that all agree, that all dress the same, look alike, right? No, it's going to be a lot of disagreement, right? You got to put up with that. So sovereign union, if you're going to have an actual union of two sovereign entities, it requires healing and integration of the shadow. You can't be projecting what you think you're not onto other people. Healing on all levels, find better solutions, and we can actually create harmonious communities if you create harmonious selves, right? And that's what I mean by sovereign harmony, right? You create harmony through your recognizing the sovereignty and connection to the whole. That's how you create it. You don't create harmony by agreeing with people and being codependent and saying, well, I need you for this. What do you need me for? And if you don't need me for that anymore, my life is threatened, right? That doesn't create harmony. It never has, never will. And that's how all global relations are right now. We're taught that, and every society is taught that you create codependencies. You create a marriage right off the bat where you offer that and they offer this, and then you can't really break it off because you need what they're offering. No sovereignty, right? It's a system that's ingrained in us. Codependence. Even like going back to like the shows, like in the 90s, I used to watch Seinfeld and Friends, and those are the shows that were on. And those shows are all codependent. Like, they're just all about codependence. Everything is about, oh, if this person did this, I have to do this, and then I'm this, and I'm reacting to that, and it's just this whole mess of codependence. And that's what we're locked in. And so the real way to harmony is through sovereignty, through creating peace no matter what in your little world. And then that'll ripple out to others, right? And if everyone creates peace in their little world, there's just nothing but peace. There's nothing but light shining. And no one's looking outside of themselves to say, do you agree with me? Do you validate me? Please validate me. I'm not harmonious. I'm not peaceful unless you validate me. No, just validate yourself. And so conscious liberty, that's my word for it. It's this real idea of liberty. The idea that on paper the United States tried to create, but couldn't happen because of lack of technology, lack of actual connectivity of the people that were part of it. I mean, this is why they created like the Electoral College, because they're like, well, we'll never really reach everybody. Not everyone's going to really know what the issues are. They can't really read about it. Not everyone reads and writes. So we're just going to get a bunch of people that represent the voters, and because we have to. That's all we have. But we don't have that anymore. We don't even need to do voting booths anymore. I mean, we can just do it right from your freaking iPhone. Just vote, right? Like everyone can. And it can have, you know, like, no matter who you are, you can find a way to just vote right away. And then it would be a real count of votes and not like this process of, you know, bureaucrats and things like that. This is what, like, the millennial generation, when they get into offices really early, they're just going to change everything. Really, really quickly, in the next 10 years, I see it happening. So what we're doing is we're releasing divide and conquer, that two-party collectivism where neither one of these are the good guy. It's all about heroes versus villains, right? And my hero is your villain, and that's how it's supposed to work. You're supposed, and everything, you know, everything that happens in the media, they divide you. You know, whether it was like, you name it. Like right now, it's the thing with the NFL. With, you know, are you for the flag? Are you for freedom of speech and protest? And it's like, why do you have to even pick one? Like, why can't you just understand the whole situation, right? And be with, like, be okay with the protesters and be okay with the people that, you know, they're actually choosing not to watch something they like just because of protesting. They've got problems. You know, they're the one with the problem. You're not the one with the problem. But you got to let them have a problem, right? That's not yours to fix. So communication at a distance, it changes things. Changes things. What we're going to see, you know, a lot of change in how we work, transparency and information, things like that. The new economy is going to be less jobs, more creative services, less job hours. We're already seeing this. Networking relationships, cooperation, collaboration, information sharing, microgrid utility feeds. That's what I see. Because like I said, what's happening in Puerto Rico right now is not a result of the realities of power. It's the result of having centralized power that if that gets destroyed, no one has power. And that's how it is here too, right? And people lose power in storms and things and earthquakes and whatever it is because they don't have decentralized power. And we're going to see that shift where it's not going to be a big deal anymore because there'll be damages, but they'll be easily fixed and in localized areas. So business is changing. So going from, you know, to more self-conscious business owners, not just the sort of leader of the oligarchy that's on the top of the pyramid, but more of, you know, on the same page as their employees, right? Clear company philosophies, so transparency and flexibility. So we're not kind of going, well, we're up here, you're down there. You only need to know what you need to know. It's like really sharing, really being transparent. Innovation driven, not just tradition driven, or this is our process, like this is how we do it at this company. No, what if something else could work better? Let's do it, the innovation. Authentic relationships between employers and employees, that's where I feel like I want to come in with that. And thriving over surviving, really. And so what I'm doing, just to show you an example, with Sovereign Harmony, I use tools to uncover and address unconscious, like astrology. Combine that with tools to create peace, heart math. This is, again, creating coherence and peace. And so what can we use it for? To me, I break it down. There's 5 unconscious characters: the moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, and the sun in everyone's chart. So I can get a sense of what people's core intentions, action principles, relationship styles, communication styles, emotion reactivity are. If I can get that for any individual in a group, I can teach them how to get along with someone else with a different set, right? And just understand that I react emotionally differently than you do. I speak differently than you do. I comprehend information differently than you do. And then this is all the heart math stuff. There's 5 different techniques that they use to get into coherence, depending on the situation. And I've aligned those with all the 5 planets because they go along with those. There's one that has to do with communication, that's Mercury. There's one that has to do with, it's called freeze frame technique, which basically has to do with getting out of emotional reaction, which is the moon. Heart lock-in technique, that's Venus. Venus has to do with the heart. Quick coherence, quickness, Mars, right? And then you have the inner ease, the sun. The sun is the internal driver. So all these techniques line up. They weren't supposed to, but when I saw heart math, I was like, wait a minute, I see something going on here. This is a nice little link. But this is just an example. I mean, I think we're all going to have our own little things to offer, but this is what I want to do, is help these businesses align, you know, more appropriately. Help any new communities that are forming align more appropriately. Get who's going to be the better ones in charge in the first place, and that's not going to be the ones that have the most aggressiveness, but the ones that have probably the more cooperativeness. You know, And so the whole idea is that that's giving respect to the sovereign differences, the sovereign uniqueness or authenticity of all individuals. And when all sovereign individuals are generating their own power, in other words, they're not looking for outside validation, they're not codependent, they can be at peace no matter what someone else is deciding to do, right? Then everyone's light is shining. And when all the lights are shining, what happens to shadows? They're gone. Shadows only exist if there are lights shining on something dark. If all the lights are on, you don't see shadows at all. And this is how we heal. So in other words, this is how we heal the shadow in the world, is by each individual shining their brightest. And you can't shine your brightest unless you accept your own inner differences and can create peace within no matter what other people are doing around you. Right? If you're affected by other people, that's not going to happen. And so that's the kind of mentality we need to have to even be open to what could be coming with free energy. Because free energy essentially is that. It is generating energy on the spot, everywhere. Everywhere. This is what I mean is this will take away the whole idea of losing power. So there's different entities out there, like Quantum Power in Seattle. They have their own systems. You can research that. Tawari in India, they have a whole set of different ways to utilize free energy. The Quiche Foundation in Iran is another one. Okay, and then there's a Searle Energy Generator. That's in San Diego, actually. They have a little facility in San Diego. I ran into this guy. His name is Jason Verbelli. He works for John Searle, the Searle Effect Generation. I saw a YouTube video with Jason Verbelli, and I was like, oh, this is pretty new. He was talking about free energy, how it works, this and that. I was at the bookstore, controversial bookstore down in North Park, and I ran into the dude. And I was like, did I see you on a YouTube? I had no idea he was even in San Diego. I just saw him on YouTube, you know? And I was like, did I see you in a YouTube talking about cavitation? And he was like, yeah! He was like so happy that someone recognized him from YouTube, and and then he invited me to this whole mini conference thing of different people, and so I got to meet like people in the know of free energy and how it works and whatnot, and it's really cool because it essentially solves everything, right? Because what we're supposed to believe, again, it's the same symbology of power. Like we're taught to believe that only our leaders, only those politicians, those leaders can really know what's good for us, right? They have the power, and we'll do what we're told. All right, so because of that, we have a whole, how we generate power is in the same form. We have, again, centralized stations that feed power to the masses, and if it breaks down, everyone loses power, right? And so what this is doing is the opposite. It's showing that we can have power generated sovereignly in each unit, and so that if some power goes out here or there, it's very easily transferable, and so it easily fixes it. And so that problem goes away. Every problem that is supposed to be a water problem, like we say, oh, there's a water crisis, there's so much water in the world, but why can't we use it? Because it's not fresh, it's not clean. But it's not that we can't get it fresh or clean. Why can't we get it fresh or clean? Because energy is too expensive, right? That's the only reason. But if we have the energy, we have free energy to make water clean and to salinize the ocean water, then we have endless water. Endless water for everyone, which means, again, that makes food prices go down, right? And then also the availability, and if you have free energy, getting water to drier places is easier because you don't have the excuse, oh, it's expensive to transport water. No, it isn't, because energy is free. So we have all this water, and we have the ability to get it anywhere. And if you have the ability to get water anywhere, you can grow things anywhere. If you can grow things anywhere, you have plenty of food. And if you have plenty of food, you don't have a starvation problem. You see, it feeds into itself. This whole idea that we can't generate power on the spot is a trap. And that's what keeps us. And it's the same, again, symbolically, it's the same thing as teaching us that we can't sovereignly connect to the all, that we have to be part of a collectivism and codependent existence in order to survive. And it's just not true. And so those are just some images and patterns and things that we won't get into. But the idea being, this stuff exists. It's not like a pipe dream. So no matter how much fighting and darkness going on in the world, if you're that small lamp in the darkness, that's all that matters. You got to be the peace, be the tolerance, be the forgiveness, or else you're not going to see it around you. No one else is going to give it to you, so you got to create it. 99% of us are good people, respect others. This is true. And then you got this guy, Smithers. And I had to do it. I had to do it. I had to do it. So there he is. But I wanted to show you is right here. His ascendant at 29 degrees Leo. So that's where Regulus was. Remember, from 1930s till 2011. So in other words, when he was born. So Regulus literally is rising in his chart. And he represents this transition then. Exactly what we're getting rid of. Exactly the epitome of everything that has to get bled out is right here. And if we don't let this happen, it'll never get bled out. So we have to just, again, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to create peace no matter what. He's giving us the opportunity by being who he is, by being all the 29th degree of Leo that he can be, right? All of it. And it's like, it's perfect because if we don't let it, if you can learn to not let him get to you, to not let what his opinions are or any threats of what he might do affect you, you now learn how to do this when he's gone. Because he's only going to be there temporarily. But now, and also what this is doing for people, because it's easy, and I was going to talk about this in a different slide, but it's so easy to pick out, like, or to see through someone like him. It's so easy to be like, oh, wow, he's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. That's easy. But can you do that for the other politicians that have always been bullshit? And he's teaching us how to do that. He's teaching us that when he's gone, we're going to question authority from here on out. Because this is the first time we've ever felt like it was okay to question it. We're like, no, I don't even care if he's president because blah, blah, blah. When did that ever happen before? People just be like, well, got to respect the president. Got to respect the president. Now we're just like, fuck the president, right? But that's where we need to be. That's how you get past it. That's how you get past this whole codependent Regulus and Leo dominance. People are going to step into the sovereignty because they're like, this isn't my leader. I'm my leader. You see? And that's his whole role, is to transition us. And it's funny because his progressed sun switched over from Leo to Virgo and over that ascendant just before the election, which is significant. And here's Bernie with all that stuff going on in Virgo up there, right there. So his energy symbolizes what, the Virgo kind of energy, but because he's old school, because he's coming from Regulus and Leo, he doesn't know any better. And all he knows is socialism. That's all he knows. He doesn't know any better. And again, we don't need collectivism. We need more sovereign individuality. That's fine. His ideas are okay if that could all happen. Maybe with free energy, we'd have enough money to go around to do all that. Right? But really, what did the popularity of Trump and Bernie Sanders, because they were both the most popular candidates by far, right, in 2016. Those were the two popular. Why were they so popular? What did they have in common? Or what did it show that everyone had in common as far as what do they want in a president or in a leader? It's almost a unanimous desire for authentic leadership. Now, you can argue and say, well, Trump isn't authentic. But to those on that side of the puzzle, he seemed like the most authentic thing ever. To those on the other side of the puzzle, Bernie seemed like the most authentic thing ever. Both sides are like, we want authenticity. We just have different beliefs. You see? We've been split, divide and conquer, but everyone wants authenticity. That's the truth. We all want authentic leadership. That's why someone like Hillary Clinton was just so off-putting to most people, because she was just another it was great that it was going to be a woman and everything, but just another politician doing what the elites tell her to do, right? And we're done with that. And that's why even though whatever they did with the primaries to make sure that she got in and not Bernie, it didn't work out in the end. If anything, it backfired, right? It backfired because everyone said, in the end, no one's going to vote for Trump. Then they did. But it's good, like I said, he's got a role, so let him play his role. So, why can't Bernie's principles operate within the current model? Because he can't. This is a great quote by Buckminster Fuller. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. You change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. He was trying to shove all this into the existing model. It's not going to work. So Bernie's never going to work. And we didn't need that. You can't fix the broken system. Again, with Pluto and Capricorn right now, what I see is a total breakdown in the financial system. And whether that means cryptocurrency, whether that means a new world kind of order of banking and whatnot, whatever it is, something new is going to emerge. And that's when we can actually get Again, this is what I said before, you know. Anyone can detect lack of authenticity in the villain. So obviously, you know, how it's portrayed right now, we have villains and heroes. Right now, because most of the media is owned by the left, Donald Trump is the villain, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but that's the portrayal, right? And of course, Bernie was the hero, right? He was the hero in most of the left-wing kind of way. But the idea is be your own hero. Because when you do that, you're not looking for outside to take care of you. You're not looking for that. You don't need that. This is where the power generations come in. Changing the guard, changing the idea of collectivism to individualism. So scale matters. When we come from connection consciousness and we use the connection technologies, actually using the technologies, that's the paradigm shift. That's when we can actually shift. So the idea of America was just an idea that could never exist until the technologies came out. And when we add in the connective technologies, which is what the power generations are going to do, that's going to give us another opportunity. Like, for example, the House of Representatives. Right now we have people sent from every state to Washington, D.C. to live there. And they get reelected and reelected and reelected and reelected. And it's just this cesspool of potential to be corrupted by lobbyists and whatnot. With current technology, why would representatives have to live in Washington? Why wouldn't they live where they're supposed to represent? You know, maybe once, twice, 3 times a year they meet. But why would they have to? They can do it from home. They can do it from their location. They should be where their constituents are, right? And we have the technology to make that happen. And we can change voting, like I said. We don't need electoral colleges. We don't need the way they do the primaries. You know, we can just do direct popular voting on the spot. Boom. You get a window of time. You vote. It's over. But anyway, so globalists right now, you know, it's collective organization. It's codependence. It's Regulus and Leo. And it's based on separation. That's what leads to communism and fascism. They're two sides of the same coin. Neither one is better than the other. Most people argue, oh, if I had to do one, I'd go with communism. Fascism's terrible, you know. But reality is they're both taking away freedom, both take away creativity. Externalities, which is a fancy word that economists call pollution. It's an externality. That is a big result of large-scale entities. When you have small-scale sustainable communities, you don't have massive pollution. You don't have massive outlays. So you don't have those problems. So pollution is preventable. When you switch to local connection consciousness rather than national or global separation consciousness, that's when it changes things. Because in all collectivism or statism, there's always going to be a shadow. Because remember, what takes away the shadow? When all the individual lights are shining, that takes away the shadow. So if you're dimming those lights with powerful people, which is what statism and all collectivism is, there's going to be a shadow, and it's going to result in unrest. It's how energy works. Anyway, so things are not getting worse. That's my whole point here. Even though it seems like, because everything is collapsing, but that's a good thing. Things aren't getting worse, they're getting uncovered. And so it's up to us to just do our job. You know, if you're part of the power generations, it's your job to get everyone through this. That's why you're here. Just let us get through. So anyway, whatever you think, whatever you got out of this, I don't care. I mean that in a detached way, not in an apathetic way. But I just mean, you know, you're going to get what you get out of it. It's your own subjective experience. That's what I want to be in, you know, 2054, telling the story of how it used to be. Anyway, take the best, leave the rest. It doesn't matter. If anything applied to you, resonated with you, take it, use it. If it didn't, discard it, disagree with me. I'm free. We can disagree. You can disagree. You're free too. Anyway, any questions? A lot of information.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any questions? Right on time. Any comments or anything? Like, want me to elaborate anything? I had to shove a lot of stuff out in a really fast period of time.
Where would you